Hey everyone, Austin here again with another Let's Play video. Today, as you can see, it's going to be Life Force for the NES. This is one of those games I did a Let's Play on many years ago, but as some of you guys know, I'm going through my back catalog one by one, slowly but surely, and re-recording some of those old games I covered many years ago. I've since gotten a better capture setup, and I'm currently using a retro USB AVS console to get this NES footage, so things look much nicer now. And it's also fun revisiting these games from a more current perspective, because I've played a lot of games in the last several years since last recording this game. And I think I've gotten better as a player, so it's fun to go back to these old games and give them another shot with the current perspective. So yeah, Life Force isn't the most challenging game on the system, but one of the cool things about it that I found out recently is that it does actually loop, just like Contra or the original Gradius. So they, through subsequent loops, the game gets harder and harder and harder. And I've, as such, gotten towards the end of Loop 3 on my own, and have definitely seen the difficulty increase. So one of these days, I want to try to go through and try to do Loops 4, 5, and maybe even 6, or however far it goes, just to kind of see how crazy things get. So while Life Force actually can get really difficult, one of the great things about the game is that it's very newcomer friendly. It's one of the first shmups I ever played back in the day, and I find that it's one of the easiest shmups for people to get into. For one, it's got two players at the same time, two-player simultaneous gameplay, which was kind of rare for the shoot-'em-up genre, especially on the NES. So if you're new to shmups or shoot-'em-ups and you got a friend that is new as well, both you guys can jump in together and help each other out. And as such, Life Force on the NES is quite a varied game, which is nice. There's a lot of different ways you can try to tackle this game, either with friends or by yourself, or if you're an expert player, you can try to loop it as many times as you can. And as such, I think it still holds up really well, and it's still definitely a worthy game to play if you're a fan of NES games, especially shoot-'em-ups. So yeah, before we jump into the game here, as usual, I want to give a big shout out to my current Patreon backers. So all you guys backing this channel via Patreon, thank you as always for your continued support. If you're interested in supporting this show through Patreon, links are in the description box as always. Also, I'm going to flash by the live stream super chatters. These are basically direct donations from the live stream, so thank you guys for your support as well. I live stream here every Friday night now, so if you want to stop by on a Friday night and say hello, feel free to do so. Maybe we'll see you there. So, alright, let's go ahead and hit that start button. There is the Konami code you can do in this game, but we will not be doing that. We're going to be playing this game normally and going through the game with our stock 2 lives. So, Life Force is actually a part of the Gradius series. It was called Salamander in Japan. And so, as such, it operates very much like the Gradius series. Now, actually, the original Salamander in the arcade didn't operate quite as much like the Gradius series. You would actually pick up power-ups on the playfield that would instantly upgrade your ship. Well, in Life Force here, it uses the more traditional Gradius power-up style system, where power-up pods appear on the playfield, and when you pick them up, it boosts this bar in the bottom portion of the screen. And there's a whole bunch of different item selections you can activate there. So you can see that it's blank. The slot that it's currently on right now is actually for missiles, so now it's for Ripple. Ripple is a form of laser. There's 2 lasers in the game. You've got your regular laser, which I'm using, and it's my preferred laser. It's very powerful. But you've also got the Ripple laser, which is very handy as well. The Ripple covers more screen space, so for newcomers that might actually be the better laser, depending on your skill level. You can also get options, just like in the Gradius series, and so my next step right now on my power-up chain is to get 2 options. So you have a maximum of 2 options in this version of Life Force. Apparently the Japanese version, Salamander on Famicom, actually allows you to use 3 options. I wasn't aware of that until I live streamed this game, and someone had mentioned that to me. So that's pretty interesting. I didn't know that. And here's our first option, like so. And Life Force is one of those types of games where if you touch any physical object, you will die, so you don't want to touch anything. Not these teeth, not the hard ceiling or floor. There's also a couple of random extra life opportunities as well. We might actually get one right here. It's a couple of secret extra lives, if you will. There we go. Here it is, right there. Just got one. There's also another free extra life you can get later on in this level, and I'll point that out once we get it. Okay, so we're almost on our way to getting our second option. You'll notice on this first level, there's background obstacles, or I should say, you know, physical obstacles like walls and ceilings and floors and whatnot that just sort of cave in on you. So when you're playing Life Force, it's really good to know where these things are. And so this is not the one we need to go through. It's this one right here. So this one right here on the bottom, you want to just shoot on the bottom and stay here on the bottom. You'll get yourself an extra life at the end of it. So there's a couple of different opportunities like that throughout the course of the game. There's hidden extra one-ups and things like that, which can extend your lives. So if you have problems with this game, you don't necessarily need the Konami code, although the option is there. So the Konami code is the, you know, the infamous up, up, down, down, left, right, BA, start, or something like that. Sometimes it's altered slightly depending on the game. But Life Force does have that, and you will get 30 lives just like you'll get in the original Contra on NES. So if you're having a crazy hard time with this game, you can use that as a crutch. I don't usually recommend using that as a crutch, though, because what that does is it actually makes you lazy. It makes you not really care about how many lives you have, because you can just fly right back in. There's no threat to dying. There's no potential game over opportunity. Well, if you are really horrible, you know, you might still get a game over, but I don't personally recommend using the 30 life code if you're trying to play this game seriously. If you're trying to actually get better at it and try to beat it consistently without a crutch like that, especially. I would just play the game normally and learn it. Just learn it like you learn anything else. And I think the game is a lot more satisfying to tackle that way as well. Same goes with Contra. I do not recommend the 30 life code because, again, there's no threat to you dying. There's no major game over potential or opportunity. And you're less likely to learn from your mistakes. When you have a limitation, you're more likely to learn from your mistakes. So something to keep in mind. It's always actually kind of been, I don't want to say a pet peeve of mine, but when I follow a lot of gaming forums and things like that, and I hear from people that are kind of new to these games, and, you know, they just jump in with the Konami code, and it's like, no, you're doing it wrong, man. You're doing it wrong. And these are people that are basically in the same league of users that will, you know, if they play an arcade game on MAME, they'll just credit feed their way to the end of the game and then say they beat it, but they don't really gain anything out of the experience. They don't learn anything. And a lot of times they will never go back to it. You know, they credit fed it, they're done with it, it's a one and done kind of affair, but I feel these games excel the most when you're trying to get better at them, when you're trying to improve, and you can do that through just normal play with normal settings. You don't need a crutch like the 30 life code to get through these games and get better at these games. I think the 30 life code actually can have an opposite effect, and that's something I don't think a lot of people consider. So yeah, this is Life Force is a pretty straightforward shooter. There's a couple parts like this where you've got objects that you can't destroy, so all these rocks, they can't be killed, so you gotta watch out for them, just dodge them. You also have these pods on the sides of the screen that spawn in enemies. And sometimes you can just let your missiles do the work for you. Your missiles will kind of like crawl along the ground and hit whatever enemies that are there. I would say your missiles are not quite as useful as they are in the baseline or mainline Gradius series. So they can still be useful here, but they're very weak in comparison to the missile power-ups you get in the mainline Gradius games. So don't rely on them as much as you would in, say, Gradius. But it is still good to have them. There are still some enemies that your missiles will kill in one hit. They're not that great for the pods on the side that spawn enemies and things like that. So for those, you're better off trying to get next to your walls and destroying the pods on your own with your laser, whatever laser power-up you have. Now, unfortunately, these power-up pods, they don't actually give you points in this game. So there's the Gradius series has been kind of inconsistent in that regard. In some games, the power-up pods will give you points. In other Gradius games, they don't give you points. And on this sort of mini-boss right here, you just have to destroy these barriers and then shoot the eyeballs behind them. And I think there was actually a one-up opportunity here, but I think I missed it. I think you have to... No, there's one. Very cool. So this is what I was talking about. There's a couple of one-up opportunities throughout the course of the game. And one of the great things about the Gradius series and Life Force subsequently is you've got your options. You can try to line yourself up in a specific way to cover more screen space with your options. Although it doesn't really work quite as well in this one because you only have 2 options. And just like those eyeballs in the very beginning here, we have to destroy the barriers up front, and then once the core becomes available, just shoot the core. That wasn't meant to be a pun, but in the classic Gradius series, there's usually an announcer that actually says, "Shoot the core!" Of course, those were usually chopped out of the NES games. You didn't have a whole lot of voice sampling on NES games. There were some exceptions. Gradius 2 on Famicom might actually have a couple of voice samples. I have to play that again. I don't remember. I do actually plan on doing a Let's Play of Gradius 2 on the Famicom eventually. Sometime soon, hopefully. I picked up the cartridge about 6 months ago. And, yeah. So hopefully we can do that. So, this is the infamous fire level. This is where I think newcomers start to have trouble. What I like to do is just sort of sit down either at the top or the bottom like this, have my ship be more towards the middle of the screen, and have my options cover the bottom part of the screen. I prefer using the laser power-up as well, not the ripple, because it's much more powerful than the ripple. And I can just sit here and let my lasers do a lot of the work for me. And then the big thing here is watching out for the fire that spews out. You will die instantly if you touch it. But you can actually just sit at the back of the screen. The fire never starts from the back of the screen. It always starts from farther up on the screen. So it's one strategy to know when you're playing this. Back in the day, Nintendo Power covered this game, and it actually had locations for every single, bit of fire that pops out, and we used to just study that. But in reality, you don't need that. All you need to do is just stay towards the bottom of the screen, watch where the fire is coming from. Look, another extra life. It's a hidden extra life. You're up there shooting, it will appear. But yeah, just wait and watch for the fire, and then just move accordingly. You do have to work a little bit, you do have to look, and you do have to move. But really, it's not that complex. So just watch the edge of the screen at the far right. Maybe kill some extra enemies, and, you know, in the meantime, if you're trying to get extra points and things like that. So the only way to get points in this game is to kill enemies. So like I said, the power-up pods don't give you points in this one. And there's more fire. And there's even more fire. This is basically the entire level. I mean, this is all you do in this stage. There's a series of those little dragons that come out as well, and your final dragon, the screen will actually stop scrolling. That lets you know that you're right before the boss fight. So we're getting really close to the end now of this level. The boss fight in this level is pretty easy as well. And he's basically just a really big dragon that just spews fire straight ahead, and this is the last one. So now we're going to be at the boss fight. So the final power-up I got, by the way, at the end of that bar is a force field. So you'll notice I've got this blue force field around me. Not really good for walls and things like that, but it is great for projectiles. And for this guy right here, you really just have to shoot him in the mouth. That's pretty much it. And I like to constantly line up my options with my ship so I can basically end up doing triple the damage. So instead of having them spread out like this, a lot of times on a boss fight, I'll intentionally move back and forth to get them lined up with me, like so. So one of the really fun things about Life Force is that it does mix up the gameplay style. So it starts off as horizontal, then it moves to vertical, then back to horizontal, then back to vertical, and it just does that. It keeps switching like that throughout the course of the game. It's always one of the defining features of this game, one of the defining aspects. And there's not a lot of shmups out there that do that go from horizontal to vertical. Which is kind of a shame, honestly. I think it would be really neat if there were more of those over the course of the years. But I guess it is what it is. At least we've got games like Life Force that do it, and we can enjoy those for what they are. So there's going to be a slight speed up section coming up here shortly, right here. And there's these blue pod looking things. So you want to try to just avoid those pod things, if you can. Either avoid them or shoot them. Fortunately, I'm maxed out on firepower, so I can just shoot them. But say if I die here, I won't have any firepower, basically, or power-up, so it's good to just avoid them at that point. So one of the things I didn't really talk about is that in Life Force, it doesn't have a checkpoint system like the original Gradius games do. It actually spits you right back out, kind of like the US version of Raiden or something like that, or Twin Cobra, in the arcade specifically. The console versions of those usually had start back modes, or checkpoints as they call them. But Life Force just spits you right back out. So, you know, that's one of the other things that makes Life Force a little bit easier than other shooters in general, but also other Gradius games, because the Gradius games had nasty checkpoints typically, that made recovering very, very difficult, and that's why some of those games were as notoriously difficult as they are. It was the checkpoint system. Also, when you die in this game, your options will actually still be there on the screen, so if you come back on screen fast enough and you grab the option, you can get your options back. They didn't really do that again up until, I guess, Gradius 5, which is kind of crazy to think about. Gradius 5 actually also had a two-player simultaneous gameplay mode, which was really cool, too. One of the great things about Gradius 5 was that when it came out, they incorporated several elements from Salamander, or Life Force specifically, like being able to grab your options after you died, and having two-player simultaneous gameplay, which not many games in the Gradius series had done that. So it was nice when that game came out, seeing the nods to Life Force. For a lot of us in the United States, Life Force was one of the first shooters we ever played. If you didn't play Gradius first, then you probably played Life Force first if you were a kid growing up, born in the 80s and growing up in the 80s. Life Force was probably one of the first shmups you ever played, and it was probably one of the first co-op shmups you ever played as well. And so when they brought back a lot of those elements to Gradius 5, it was definitely a kick of nostalgia for a lot of us that had grown up with Life Force. Yeah, so more enemies here that you can't kill, and on this part you just want to stay all the way back. You notice there's these lasers firing out. If you play subsequent loops, there are way more lasers firing. You pretty much have to sit at the back of the screen. And on this part, you just shoot this guy in the mouth, and like I told you earlier, I lined up my lasers, so it was basically 3x damage, and I killed that thing really, really fast. The bullets that come out of his mouth are sort of randomized, so I got a really good pattern there, actually. I was able to just sit in the middle and really have no threat, and so I was able to kill him really fast. If you let him sit for too long, his eyeballs will pop out, and they'll basically chase you down. So there is a little bit of a threat to taking a while to kill him. Now you have to watch out for this area too, because the collision detection on the walls is a little wonky. You look at the missiles flying across them. Notice how they're not even touching the actual ceiling or the flooring. So that basically tells you where you can't touch. So if I go past those missiles, I'll die, even if it doesn't look like I'm touching the actual floor or ceiling. It's just something you have to deal with some of these old video games. The collision detection and the hitboxes weren't always the best, unfortunately. So I'm going to just go ahead and try to let these missiles do the work here. Another extra life. So we started off with 2 lives, by the way. We're already up to 12. Now, I'm probably not going to have a deathless run. It would be really cool if I could, but I don't think it's going to happen because there is a speed-up section at the end of the game, which is kind of notorious for giving people a hard time. And I initially really wanted to practice that section, just fire up save states on my power pack and just, like, memorize it. But, I don't know, I realized I didn't really have the time to do that. So we're probably not going to get through that speeder section without dying, but we will most certainly 1 credit clear this game, basically meaning we beat the game without continuing or getting a game over. So a 1 credit clear in this game is usually pretty easy. Like I said, it's not too terribly difficult, especially if you've got power-up. So if you're powered up like this, the game is way easier than it is if you're not powered up. So something else to keep in mind is if you're powered up, try not to die, because the game is a lot more challenging when you're not powered up. And that's the case with a lot of shooters. Most shooters actually are, you know, quite challenging when you're not powered up. So we actually got a little bit of a classic Gradius nod right there. The old boss music from the original Gradius game. And some ships that actually look like they come from the first Gradius as well. So one of the fun things about the Gradius series, which also includes Salamander and Life Force, is that, you know, they kind of like the Castlevania series actually. That series does it very much the same way. Is a lot of elements are carried over from game to game. You'll have boss rushes in the Gradius series that feature bosses from previous Gradius games, and you'll have music that makes a reappearance, and things like that. So it's fun playing through all the Gradius games and seeing all the nods each game had to prior entries in the series. It's just always a good time to see those things in action. So lots of different power-up pods you can pick up here. So this is actually just good if you've died. And I could try to let some of my options here do the work. Notice how I just let the options sift like right through those walls, or just move right through those walls. I didn't really need to because like my missiles took care of the other enemies, but on subsequent loops, there's actually more enemies on those corridors, so it's easier to die. I'm just trying to destroy as many of these things as I can. See if there's like a hidden one-up opportunity there or something like that. I'm just kind of curious. But I wasn't able to destroy all of them. Alright, so this is our boss fight. There's actually basically two phases to this boss. The first is the ceiling collapses on you. So you don't want to touch the ceiling as it falls. You will die. And so we're just going to wait for that. And I'll just go back right now, like so. So you notice if you try to shoot these, your bullets don't go through them. A good way to tell if you can go through something or not is if your bullets get absorbed by them. So that lets you know that if you touch it, you die. And on this boss, you basically just have to shoot it in the eyeball. And then after this, we're on the final level. And that's that. Alright, the final stage is a vertical section. And you get a lot of fast enemies on this level. So if you die on this level, it's actually really tough to recover. Especially on subsequent loops. If you try to loop this game, it's much more difficult to recover. But even now, it's still challenging to recover, because these guys just fly right down the screen really, really quickly. I'm going to actually speed up a little bit, too. I know it's going to be useful for the speeder section later on. And you can see there's more bullets here as well. You've got these glowing orbs that just fly down the screen as well. Watch out for these things of fire. They usually just try to hang out on the edges of these islands. And we got another extra life. So we're up to 14 lives. And see, it's kind of what I was talking about. Yeah, like, if you try to learn the game normally and you play it normally, you'll get plenty of extra lives. You'll get plenty of buffer room in case you're scared of dying or something like that, not being able to recover. So you don't need the 30 life code to get through this game and have a good chance of succeeding. So So we're going to go inside here shortly, and we're going to actually see one of the Gradius series' most defining features, and that is the Easter Island heads, or the Moai heads, as they call them. So in other Gradius games, what I do is I'll get my power-up meter on the bottom set on top of the force field, or the shield power-up. And then the second I lose my force field, I'll just select it again. I'll just activate it again. I don't really do that in Life Force here, at least not on this first loop, because the game is easy. I never really find myself running into projectiles, and that's really all the force field is good for. If you run into walls, you would probably die instantly, so the force field's not really any good for, you know, protecting you against floors and ceilings and things like that. But in the more traditional Gradius games, I will absolutely let it sit on the force field power-up, and then once I lose the force field, I'll just reactivate it. And then I'll pick up more power-up icons, trying to get my power meter back up to the force field. These guys bounce around, you just want to shoot them in the mouth, that's their weak spot. And so now we're basically on to the final boss in the game. Oh, more Moai heads, sorry, spoke too soon. And it's going to slow down, letting us know we're there. And there's going to be this snake that flies around. I think that's the salamander they mentioned in the Japanese versions of the game. And then once you kill that, you have to destroy the orb in the center of this planet-looking thing. And then we go to the speeder section, and then that's the game. That's it. That was a bad idea. I ran straight into the planet and I killed myself. This is gonna make the speeder section here really difficult. I'm not gonna be fast enough. But it's okay, we got 14 lives to do this. We have two options, but the options are pretty much useless here. It's just all about dodging. And here we go. It's like revving up for a roller coaster ride. So there's one infamous part on this speeder section, which comes at the very end, where one of these actually closes all the way. So you have to be far enough up the screen to get past it. And it's going to be here shortly. And it's this one right there. Bam, that's it. So, oh well, we died twice. Not a big deal. It would have been actually really interesting to have gotten through that without dying. And to not die at the final boss itself. And that would have been a, you know, a one life clear. But, yeah, so no ending, unfortunately. You basically just get this over and over again. In the Japanese version, supposedly there is actually an extended ending, which is nice. So, I'm just gonna let this sit here. It just, basically, if you hit start, it goes right back into the game again. We start off on loop 2. And that's pretty much it. So, you know, Life Force, like I said, pretty cool shooter on the I was about to say Super Nintendo. I really want to play some Super Nintendo, actually. Really cool shooter on the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's a classic, and if you're not too familiar with it, I highly recommend checking it out if you like NES games. And, you know, the Gradius series in general is fantastic as well. And like I said earlier in the Let's Play, I do hope to be back with some Gradius 2 on the Famicom. I do have the cartridge. And so I need to continue practicing that and going through that. So yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments or anything like that, as usual, just post your thoughts down below in the comment section. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and like I said, I'll be going back through some of my older Let's Plays and re-recording them. It's been a while since I've re-recorded one of my Let's Plays, So it was good to get this one knocked out. I'll be focusing on a couple of others in, you know, coming up in the near future. So, you know, stay tuned for those. And yeah, Life Force on the NES, still worth playing, so definitely go check it out. And if you're brand new to the game and you've tried it and you're having trouble with it, hopefully, you know, I was able to give you some tips that, you know, helped you get through the game a little bit easier. So, but yeah, I'm out, guys. Thanks again for watching. If you're brand new to my channel, please consider subscribing. I've got a ton of Let's Plays on my channel and many, many more to come. And like I said in the beginning of the video, I also do live streams on Friday night, so if you guys are around Friday night, feel free to stay subbed and maybe, you know, check that alert box on to get notified when I go live. And feel free to stop in on one of those streams and say hello and let me know how you're doing. So, but yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next video, and until then, take it easy.